we start the question of when's the right time to do it?
Yeah, so from my experience, my company sort of did it the opposite way. We weren't looking at profitability, we were, purely looking at efficiency and customer satisfaction. We all know what one-star reviews look like. They look better on Meld than Facebook. So, we would get instantaneous feedback online, and really that drove us to take a look at what we could do differently. In our market in Philadelphia, we actually don't have a lack of vendors. We have a lack of, good vendors, but, the market is pretty flooded with that. So, our struggle is finding the right group of vendors who, put quality over quantity and things of that nature. So, for us, it was really just looking at how can we solve some of the challenges that we had, bottlenecks, with getting work orders turned around, at the right time, quality of the work, and making sure that, again, tenant satisfaction was really the driver for us. So, in hindsight, I think understanding what I know now about, sort of having better quality control when you have internal vendors, or in-house vendors, but, the difference with that, I think I would have went in that direction of going in-house a lot sooner. But, again, when you're busy, you're in property management, I always say we spend the winter time creating all these systems that we think are going to work in the summer, and then they work, and then new problems come in the summer, so it creates that sort of vicious cycle there. But I really would implore everyone to look at sort of what are you doing with your customer satisfaction when it comes to your vendors? How are you gauging that? How are you looking at that? Insights and Insights Pro is a good opportunity. It's one that's new for me, having been with Meld only since March. But I know that the information there will really allow us to sort of look at what's the difference between using a third-party vendor and an in-house vendor, and when does it make sense to do that? I come from the mindset that you really need to have the ability to utilize both, but I think there's a lot of opportunity within sort of the in-house realm for you to have quality control. Profitability is also a factor. And as the property manager, I'm not the CEO of the company, so I'm looking at it purely from a level of how can I make my job better, my team's job better, our coordinators, their lives better, quality of life, work-life balance is really important. And that matters when they have the ability to tell someone, hey, I need you here on this day, versus trying to convince someone else to get there when we need them to be there when we really don't have a lot of leverage. So I think my message is really just sort of I would look at it from a quality control standpoint and customer satisfaction. And if you're really not able to control a lot of that, yourself, and you're relying on third-party vendors to do that, and you don't have the vendors that are willing to work with you, then perhaps you should be looking to bring some of that in-house.
So I think it's really interesting. I surveyed everyone prior to coming here. If you were reading my emails and answered the survey, and when we started doing this 3 years ago, some of the feedback is, oh, all you guys talked about was internal technicians, we don't do anything with that, and the survey responses for this year was primarily, most of you in here are doing that, are utilizing it. So seeing that change and that transition into it, I think it's because of a lot of the amazing education I gave you in the last 2 years with our marketing collateral, but anyway. So you made the leap into doing it, to setting up the system. How do you know? There we go. All right, how do you know if it's doing well? What are your leading indicators that are telling you that you're watching that you really to know if you're doing a good job with it?
Yeah, I think for me the biggest piece is how quickly things are being scheduled and the turnaround, the repair turnaround time, which is visible within Meld. Those are things that they're really you can't fake them. The numbers are what they are. The time is what it is, and getting it scheduled and then getting it turned around with in-house vendors should be easy. Easier than with a third-party vendor, but I think what really matters is looking at those numbers and then having, the sort of the relationship as managers and as leaders with our techs that you can have that communication on a regular basis about how things are going. It's awesome to have software I fought Google Sheets and all that kind of stuff as a property manager because, you know, I like to pick up the phone, I like to talk to people, I like to sit with people and have conversations. So the data matters a lot, but I think when you have open communication with your techs about how things are working and you're using that data to share with them sort of where you are as a company within that process, and I think you really get good feedback from them, and you know, you also get them to push a little harder if needed, or you know, make whatever adjustments might be necessary.
So it's kind of the same way we evaluate our vendors. We're looking at some of the key metrics: customer satisfaction, speed of repair, and one thing that we add in is communication. It's difficult with vendors. If vendors are going out, what are they communicating with tenants? We don't really want them to communicate a lot. They're not communicating with owners. They're giving us an estimate, and we're presenting that to homeowners. And so we're doing a lot of educating of both tenants and homeowners, where if we have that technician in-house, they have the ability to understand the philosophy of the organization, the company, what it means when you're renting, what it means when you're a homeowner, how to put together an estimate that makes sense to a homeowner, what pictures to take that help people understand why they need to spend their money. These are a lot of the quality control that you get a lot more, you can leverage a lot more in-house. So as you're bringing it in-house, looking at that communication piece, along with the other performance indicators that you're going to be looking for vendors. But to me, that's the benefit of having your own tech. They understand your organization, they understand your values, and they can communicate that. It's another customer service rep that gets in front of your tenants and homeowners to help drive what sets you apart as a property management organization.
Madison, what was the first part of that question again?
How do you know if you're doing it well?
Okay, so, and I want to kind of piggyback off of what he said, I'm sorry. Is that I'm going to probably say it a little bit different, because I don't necessarily believe that it's just always about speed, and I think quality is definitely there, and if you have somebody doing QC, that's important. But if you have, speed of control, speed of repair is important, it's a good metric, but if you're doing it too fast, I mean, it can go either way, right? So you need to be, it's almost like you have to set ahead of time the standards for the repair, knowing about how long it's going to take. And that's the things I would start measuring. So it's going to take somebody, I work with a company in Chicago, and the pain that he was experiencing was that they had fire doors, they had to replace a bunch of them, and it was taking his guys forever, and he couldn't figure out why. And so we were trying to figure out some of that, what was going on. It wasn't that they were dilly-dallying, it wasn't that they were wasting time. Part of the problem is to kind of go back and say, okay, can we go into this property or into this building without, at a certain time, tenants aren't letting us in, I need another person, so communication is very key, what he was saying there as well, but it's also watching carefully the numbers and making sure that it meets the metric that you've already set in place. So I go back to it and I say, what are the expectations for each job and for each person, and setting those up. And then you may have some internal team members that are better at some things than others, and so figuring out who's good at what, because everybody's going to do a repair differently, and it's going to take a different amount of time.
So how? This is annoying. So gauging profitability then. So you're watching these things. How do you know? What are you watching in regards to profitability and building that to become more profitable?
I'll start with that one. So when you have an internal team, especially when you're doing it internally, because you have a little bit more control, if you have somebody, we're just going to use easy numbers to make it blanket. $25 an hour, let's say you're paying a tech $25 an hour. If you supply a van, if you have materials that you're putting into that van, you want to have the cost of all of that calculated into that hourly rate. So think of insurance costs, depreciation costs, gas,
Yeah, and just to kind of, to piggyback on that, it's also looking at the efficiency of the type of work that they're doing. So as you're doing those metrics, as you're calculating out what is this price, gas is in there, all that is factored in. So does it make more sense for us to use our internal for get-ready returns or for renovations versus the HVAC? How spread out are my different properties? How far are they driving? What's our efficiency in scheduling routes for them to get out? Those are all factors that need to be considered as you're looking at that internal team and as you're looking at profitability. You may be able to do the job, but all the things that go into it, the vehicle, the equipment, all that, it may not make sense to be using them instead of a vendor for certain aspects of your organization. You always want to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I agree there. I think, everything that was said. The only thing I would add is, really, and something where my company is fairly new to, having internal vendors, materials are really important and sort of getting that right. What are you holding on to? Billing those owners, making sure that your guys are appropriately billing for certain materials, even down to a light bulb, right? I mean, those dollars matter and add up. So if it came out of the van or it came out of the office or warehouse, however you're set up, make sure that makes it on to expenditures, because that stuff is really important. That is just really, really big. You'd be very surprised at the end of the year, well, probably nobody here would be, but those numbers just stack up pretty high. And then again, I can't stress enough, just making sure that you're selecting in-house people for the right roles, for the right jobs. We don't do any turnovers in-house, mostly because we don't have enough in-house guys, but that would also be really hard because some of those turnovers can be massive, with a lot of work necessary, and your guys can take longer. We tried in-house maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, and we probably weren't doing it right, and we also had, a person that probably wasn't the right individual, and, he took his time, wasn't very efficient because, hey, he got a paycheck at the end of the month. Back then we were paid monthly. So that matters too, making sure you're keeping your team engaged. Now we have geo-tracking and all that kind of stuff where there's a lot more accountability, and those are some of the other things to really think about as well.
One of the things that also made a huge difference for my business is I standardized prices. So that was a game changer for me when I kind of figured that was like my light bulb moment, and that's what helped me actually increase my margins. And so I was able to go into a property, I could roughly guesstimate, okay, it's 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, it's probably 9 areas-ish, 7.5, 9 areas, depending on, how many bedrooms, how many half baths, things like that. So we would take all of that into consideration, then we were able to map out. It made doing the inspection after a turnover very easy, and then doing the scope of work, and then we were able to provide an estimate very fast with our owners. It was always about how quickly can I get the cost to the owner, how I can get funds in, and the work started. Because I had measured timelines that I wanted to get to meet. I wanted turnovers to take 3 days or less. I had that in place. If they were trashed out properties or a longer term, then we had expectations on how quickly those could be done. But then it was all backing into standardized pricing to allow us, and it's the laws of average, right? So, you're gonna win some, you're gonna lose some on certain categories. But it allowed us to be able to control how quickly, not just our guys would do the job, but how efficiently we were able to get those properties turned over, because then it turned over to property management, they had to fill it, and we were in Minnesota, so it was really burdened by weather, and we had to really fight that a lot, and so that was another, factor that we had to kind of put in play for that.
Yeah, I agree. We had that light bulb moment about 2 weeks ago. So Nick and I spent, the last 2 weeks doing a lot, but standardizing fees, just writing things out. And you'd be surprised. You poll some of your vendors, you get feedback from them as well. There are a lot of things when you look at your man hours, what you're paying your guys hourly versus what you might be paying a third-party vendor. And sometimes you realize how much you're overpaying for certain things. And then that gives you a leg up because now you can have a conversation with your owners and your clients about, what type of efficiency and pricing you can offer them and giving them some savings.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because we made no money on lawn care at all, because it was also snow removal. And so it was like a 5% margin, if that. And I knew that, and I was okay with going with that, because, on painting. So I made up for it in different ways, and you have to be flexible, so it can't just be, oh, it's 30% off across the board. That won't work, and that's where your owners start to feel the pain. And the other thing that was kind of what we also did, which a lot of people don't do, is I really ran things off of budgets. So I would work with our owners to say, here's the expectation with this class of property. This is how many maintenance requests you can probably expect, and this is how much money you'll probably spend on the turnover. We'll do our best part, because obviously it starts with the property management side. You hope to screen them well, that you get a good enough tenant in there. But, you know, I've had doctors who had children that could have drawn all over the walls, and you would think on paper they're a really great tenant, but it doesn't mean that they take care of the property well enough. So again, we put things in place like release inspections and things like that help monitor some of that. But if we could have positive conversations with our owners ahead of time on budget, then when it came time for like some CapEx issues or something like that, it was a little bit more forgiving when they needed to give us money for some of those big things, because we proactively kind of warned them based on the class of property, our experience, the age of the home, and things like that.
So Alex, you mentioned you guys tried it, abandoned, and then came back. What are like the top indicators that it's not like, what told you to pump the brakes, we need to not do this, we need to hold on? What kinds of things did you figure out to revisit?
You mean like what made us revisit the idea of having internal? Yeah. So it was really, dealing with third-party vendors, especially in our market where, again, there are a lot of them in every part of the industry. It's really tough to get them to sort of work with you, work with your tenants. You guys are really cavalier because they can get work somewhere else. It's not that hard. We just went through a huge housing boom over the past 8 years, so there was no shortage of any kind of work anywhere. And our tenants were suffering, and our owners were suffering, and we were going crazy, as property managers and maintenance managers trying to manage these people who we don't actually manage, right? We have no responsibility to them, they have no commitment to us. So at that point, we felt that, it was the best decision for us and for our tenants and our client base on both sides, right? We work for our owners, we serve our tenants. It's a ebb and flow. We thought that it was best that we have more of that control in-house, and the best way to do that was to bring in in-house vendors, utilize them for a lot of work that we knew was a struggle for our tenants as far as timelines, right? Sometimes it's just having someone from your company representing, your values, as was mentioned here, to go out and have a conversation with the tenant, understand sort of what our approach is as a property management company, and not just, some rando pulling up in a truck. Yes, it has the name on the van and all that stuff looks good, but at the end of the day, the tenants can feel that this person isn't committed to the work. And when you have the ability to curate who you're sending out, and you're doing that in a way where it's representative of you, has your name on the shirt, name on the van, those are the things that really matter. And also there's efficiency, there's quality control, there's profitability. But, for me, it was really just, I felt, out of control, and we managed 3,000 properties in the city. So 3,000 units, sorry. But it can get out of control, particularly in the summer, things of that nature. So, that was really the turning point for us, was just that we wanted to get some control.
I can semi-speak to the other side of that. Since I've been with our company, we have not had any internal. And that was a choice we made as we expanded into new markets and we got a little bit bigger, moved out of state a little bit. It was, hey, we need to reset, get vendors that can reach all of these markets until we have reset and kind of got our feet underneath us and understand what it looks like for us to have an internal team to reach these multiple markets. So instead of we were based out of Atlanta, so when we moved into Florida, instead of trying to figure out how to have an internal team in Florida, we said, hey, let's get to where we're really efficient. Well, I did it. Let's get to where we're really efficient with our vendors, and let's make sure we plan properly for using internal maintenance. with all the same things we've been talking about, all the same metrics, all the same plans being in place, instead of having the fly, fix, fly model where we're just gonna take the plane off and see about fixing it in flight, we really want to engineer it correctly so that when we take off with our internal team, when we have that internal maintenance, we're not trying to fix the plane in flight. Get our feet underneath us with those vendors so we can get everything set and launch it properly the first time.
So I think this is a good point to pivot into bonus structures. So do you have anything built for your technicians on performance, like performance bonus structures? And this can go for Josh too, with vendors as well.
So we don't, but it's something that we are excited that we're working on, giving insights, giving us a lot of information that we can utilize. And we want to do that for both our maintenance coordinators and our in-house technicians. I do think that it's really important because again, we talk about commitment, I'm talking about commitment. A lot of that comes from our vendors or our techs feeling appreciated, recognizing that we feel sort of how they feel out in the field. Field work can be tough, right? We've all done inspections here, we've all knocked on doors, things of that nature. It can be really tough, and it's important for everyone on your team, regardless of what they're doing and where they are, how long they've been doing it, to see that you recognize their efforts and having the structure, making it make sense. I expect that I can get a better commitment from them and let them know how much I appreciate them, but also let them see the sort of what the reward is for adding, being more efficient. Having that speed of repair and quality. Also, we talked about in the breakout group about in-house techs going out, grabbing their own melds and assigning them to themselves. That would be awesome, right? I guarantee you, adding a bonus structure would make that, happen a lot quicker because we would certainly base that on some level of production.
So I'm a huge believer in what gets checked gets done, and what gets rewarded gets repeated. So internally, even with our maintenance coordinators, it might be childish, but I do a Fix It Felix award. And I have this little Fix It Felix doll that people get to put on their cubicle. And every month, I award it to one of my maintenance coordinators. And the idea behind it is we're a maintenance department. So we are out there doing maintenance, but our goal is not just to fix something for our tenants. Our goal is to be the go-to in the company where if something needs to get accomplished, we're going to be the ones who are looking at resolution. So I awarded somebody last month who went in and said, I need to be more efficient in Excel docs so I can better perform for internal and external team members, and coordinated with a tenant and a vendor and ended up getting a free hot water or free water heater installed due to some of the miscommunication we had. That kind of attitude is what we're looking for, is I'm going to find a way to fix the solution. It goes beyond just, hey, there's a maintenance issue, there's a meld that's in, how can we get it cleared fast enough? But more of how can I have the approach in everything I do that I'm going to fix something. I'm not going to be a victim, I'm going to be proactive and take that out. So encompassing that in holistic, starting off with the bonuses is what are the characteristics, what are the things we want repeated, and the way we're going to do that is reinforcing it by rewarding those acts or those characteristics.
So I look at it this way: maintenance touches the entire life cycle of property management. From the minute that the property comes on board, there's something that you have to do. Usually you have to clean it, prep it, Swiffer clean, whatever it is. You might even need some minor repairs. And it's all throughout the entire tenancy, and then move in, move out, that whole process. So that whole entire life cycle, maintenance is the one consistent thing that touches the entire property. So knowing that, maintenance is also the biggest pain point for most properties, if not all property management companies. So I look at KPIs a little bit differently and look at it where definitely they should be measured from the maintenance coordinator all the way through the technician. So one KPI I can tell you that's a really good one is I did not want any new maintenance service requests 30 days after the tenant moved in. So that was, and And that is there's a few people that are responsible for that, right? So whoever is responsible for going and doing the maintenance after the turnover, who's ever doing the quality control, making sure that it's ready to rent, because we own that ready to rent condition, and then the tenant moves in, the first thing that the tenant does is they're gonna do their move-in report. I did not want a maintenance request based, a tenant moving in and saying, oh, well, this didn't work, because that means we failed. So that was kind of our metric, to say, no, don't have anything, so that was one of the KPIs we measured. And then we would do it every quarter, we would have the look, again, looking at month over month, what that number would look like at the end of the quarter, and reward them every quarter with a bonus. So it would start off, let's just say it's $2,000 that I was willing to, because I didn't like giving year-end bonuses, I just don't like doing that. So I didn't like having to worry about and measuring, well, how good did they do their job, and what did they do in February? I know they screwed up something, but I can't remember because it's now like December or the following January. So I was really terrible at that. So I know that people value time, and of course people do also value some money. So I look at it every quarter to say, what can I measure every single quarter, and then put that in place for them. And if I was willing to give X amount of $10,000 bonus at the end of the year, then I would divide that by 4 and say, okay, here's what we're going to measure every quarter, and then they would have at least 3 KPIs by role, and then those KPIs would be measured on, and then they would be incentivized off of that.
Good. So I think it's time we kind of switch gears into vendors a little bit, dig a little deeper, and I want to talk about how do you know if you have a healthy vendor network? Like, what are the leading KPIs that you're looking that tell you that your vendor network is healthy?
Yeah, so I think, for us, it is, one, customer satisfaction as far as, do we have, are our vendors communicating well with our tenants while on site, right? We got Meld, full transparency, one of the issues that we had more recently this past year, earlier in the year, we had a bad experience between a tenant and a vendor, and it went really sour. Dog bit the vendor freaked out on the tenant, and there was communication via text message that we weren't privy to, right? So we immediately started looking for opportunities of how can we bring that communication internally and then be able to monitor it, look at a Meld and look at the chat box, and we can see all of that, right? Instantly, communication changed with all of our third-party vendors with tenants because visibility, right? So I think communication and interaction is really important. When you're looking at it from just purely from a maintenance perspective, I think you really have to look at each vendor and be honest with yourself about what their availability is, right? How quickly, not necessarily can they get the repair done, how fast are they going to respond to you? Can you call them via cell phone? Those types of things. So again, I'm really big on personal relationships. So I have vendors that I know I can, in an emergency, in a pinch, I can pull my phone out, call them. We have a good relationship, we have leverage, there's good business there, and they're going to come out and support me. So, you need to have some of that. And then you also want to have, companies where sometimes you're dealing with owners or tenants or scenarios where things need to be really high level, right? So you need a few of those types of vendors. So I think really just looking at your network and understanding sort of certain price points. Do you have people who will go out and look at a job for you and give you honest feedback, even if they know that they may not get the job, right? Because sometimes that's the deal. Sometimes you don't have an idea, and your maintenance coordinator might not be able to really figure it out on what the problem is. So you want somebody that you have a trusting relationship with that can get out there, evaluate, and then give you honest feedback, even if they're not going to be the person that will get that job, will get a profit off of it, right? Other than the service calls, we always want to make sure we take care of our vendors with their service calls, right? But I think that's how I look at it. I look at the network, understanding different price points, understanding response time, and then having really strong personal relationships with as many of those third-party vendors as you possibly can.
So we had a vendor matrix, so there was 3 types of vendors I didn't employ. Well, I should say 4 because I didn't do landscaping either. But I didn't employ an HVAC vendor, a plumber, or an electrician. I made that decision more or matrix, we had by category who our vendors were and then who the backup vendors were. So that is definitely something that we put in place so everybody knew who to go to. And just like Alex said, you know, I first off, I don't do estimates again. I wasn't going to ever do a second estimate against my own company. So, and the owner came back to me and said, well, that seems really high. Can you give me another estimate? The answer was always no. But they were free to go get their own estimate with their own vendor if they wanted to. Didn't want to damage my relationships with any other outside vendor because I know their time is valuable and I needed them for, you know, work that was going on. And then internally, I just didn't have the time. And I didn't want that to be, you know, an issue that we had to worry about. So it's making sure, you know, agree that, you know, taking care of our vendors is really important because without them, none of this would be possible. Paying them well and then explaining and educating our owners why the cost was the cost it was. And we were a licensed general contractor, so it, you know, we kind of, it was soup to nuts, this is what it is. I never shared any vendor invoices with our owners either. It was very much disclosed in our property management agreement that we were using our sister company to do all of the maintenance, and that's who we sent all of the maintenance to, and so they would subcontract out anybody else. It's just like hiring, you know, a GC to come build a deck. I don't really care who they're hiring, and essentially that's up to them. I'm not gonna have control of that, and they're gonna, you know, buy the materials, and they're just gonna give me the bill, and I'm gonna pay for the entire deck to get done as a homeowner.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna have a chance to sit and talk at our tables after that, and I think that's really gonna be the benefit of finding out what kind of KPIs that you have for your vendor, because everybody has different performance issues that they monitor, that they say, hey, we're healthy because our vendors are scheduling quickly, or they got high customer satisfaction. But I think if I were to take a step back and say, what is the one thing that I would look for to know if I have a healthy vendor group, or I trust my vendors and all that, it would be, how do I treat my vendors? If they are like employees when it comes to they made a mistake, I can get on the phone, I can do a training with them, I can tell them what our standards are, they're reactive to me. It's a partnership versus a financial transaction. When I know that my vendors are going to partner with me and they're going to be responsive to when I say, I need you to schedule in Meld, not in your third-party system so I can see it. I need you to provide before and after photos. I don't need to hunt you down, 3 or 4 weeks later trying to get pictures. I need you to stop communicating or trying to upsell tenants. They have nothing to do with getting a new air conditioner versus fixing it. When they start responding and acting like they would if they were 1099 or W-2'd underneath me as an employee, that's how I know our vendor network is healthy. Of course, we still need all those KPIs. There's so many out there that you can utilize, and I encourage you to talk to somebody new today when we have a chance of what are you looking at, how do you know? But ultimately, a healthy network is they're treated just like they were internal.
I would even go back and say, have a vendor agreement. So if you're using outside vendors, make sure you have a vendor agreement. Hold them to the same, boundaries that you would internally, understanding, yes, they're not your employee, but pay them well, still negotiate a discount on the back end, and then give them consistent work, because they'll move mountains for you, just like Josh is saying, and we take care of. So we have a policy that if the vendor turned in an invoice by 10 a.m. on Monday, then they were paid that Friday. I made sure my vendors were paid every single Friday because I knew that that was a pain point for them. The reason why I did that was I also was tired of being their bookkeeper. So how many times have vendors, they want to know what am I getting paid for? They're asking questions. And so I actually, in our software, created it so that a report generated automatically to them every Friday morning that if they did several things for me, so our HVAC vendor, he had several properties he went to, it itemized them all out by work order, invoice number, what the job was, the property, and so then it totaled it up, and then when he got direct paid, we also didn't cut checks, we did direct deposit, then it matched what was in their system. So that was a really big thing for us because I knew that internally I was paying people more faster than I was probably getting paid, but that was important to me. So when you're running a
we pay our vendors weekly as well. We actually give them a little shorter time. If they get it in by Wednesday night, they can pick it up on Friday afternoon. It's for a couple of different reasons. The bookkeeping sucks, but it also, in-house, you know, invoices can pile up, right? So we want to get them out there. Our guys, you know, our third-party vendors, I mean, they tell me they wait 30, 60, 90 days on the regular from other, you know, property managers and clients that they have. We're always at the top tier just because of that one factor. And I have a hard rule that we always pay. You know, if there's an issue with any job, if there's a dispute, sometimes there are questions, owners, you know, so there's a little bit of back and forth occasionally. When that happens, our vendors understand because we've already developed a rapport that they do the work, they provide photos, good explanation on the invoice, we're gonna pay them, you know, and that's something that you have to stand by. And then also, we have a core group of vendors who you would think that they are W-2 employees. One of them actually has a desk in our office. Literally, you know, he's 1099, you know, he does his own thing, but he has a desk in our office. He spends about 2 hours there. He's a one-man band maintenance guy. He was the guy that it didn't work out with when we tried this years ago, but you know, we never got rid of him, right? He was a great guy. He does good work for the most part. It just didn't work out, you know, with that type of partnership as an in-house employee. But again, that's how much we take care of our guys, right? You know, we have a chair for them, we have a desk for them if they need to come in, right? We just have really good relationships with some of these guys, and they give us that same, you know, bit of respect and commitment, and so it's really important.
Do you guys have a single person dedicated to managing these relationships, or from that perspective, is that important to you to have?
Yeah, so it depends. This is where, you know, I have the pleasure of working with a myriad of different property management companies now, all of different sizes, and I think it really, that's where kind of the size of the company kind of comes into play, because, you know, before I told you the metric was 4 to 5 work orders, that doesn't matter how big you are. You can have 200 doors, you can have 2,000 doors, and you can be executing that many work orders depending on your market. But obviously, we have to be cognizant of payroll costs, and that can be pretty expensive. And so, if you can, you know, depending, if you're going to have an internal maintenance team, you're probably at a big enough size that this matters, but definitely bring in like a project manager or maintenance manager, whatever you want to call them, that would oversee, you know, maintenance coordination. It would oversee make-readies, things like that, but definitely having somebody be responsible who is that kind of liaison between maintenance and property management is really important. Your property managers aren't maintenance experts, and you don't really want them kind of messing around in maintenance, and they don't really want to be in maintenance. So trying to have subject matter experts is really key to helping actually, you know, have that whole transaction. So go smoothly. So if I can, I encourage companies to try to find somebody, and it could be a virtual assistant. I mean, it might not be somebody who's local, because again, depending on your market, it might be a talent issue. And if you don't have that talent locally, consider thinking virtually.
Yeah, so one of the things we're implementing right now when it comes to managing our vendors more effectively is our maintenance coordinators and our property groups aren't divided regionally. Our property managers manage groups, and they're kind of all on top of each other. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to get a better grasp on managing our vendors by region. The way I'm doing that is with team leads. So we currently have about 12 maintenance coordinators, and I want to group them in groups of 3 and assign a team lead to them. That team lead is going to have multiple roles, but one of those is going to be managing vendors for a region. And what I mean by that is these are the vendors that are operating in this region. They're going to be responsible for quality control, the communication, reaching out to them, making sure, hey, are you guys understanding Meld? Are you doing this? What are your pain points? What are things that we can do better for you? When they call in and say, hey, I need more work, why am I not getting more work? They're not just picking up, one of my maintenance coordinators isn't answering the phone and trying to explain to them, because they don't see the full picture. They're worried about their workload, not how we're doing holistically. So my goal is to have somebody more in a leadership position that can focus on a group of vendors, that can be responsible for that group of vendors, and lead them just like they would lead an internal team. they're checking in on them, they're making sure their quality, making sure they're trained, making sure they're up to speed. And if we can centralize that, we can have a much better relationship with these volunteers, be more reactive, be more responsive. If they have a question about getting paid or whatever, again, they're going right to the correct person right away.
Yeah, so we actually, Nick, our director of maintenance, pretty much handles our relationships on a daily basis with all of our vendors. Hearing them out, understanding, speaking to them about challenging issues, if there was a question about a larger job, something to that nature. So yeah, I think it's definitely necessary, but we're also looking to develop more of a leadership core within our maintenance team, because we have inspectors, we have a really large team, so we're gonna pluck out a couple of our coordinators, make them team leaders, and then also add that responsibility to give a little bit more access for both the vendors and our other coordinators who may, have questions and need things to be ironed out. Because I think, seeing more and more of that, dedicating someone who understands and, has the knowledge, because there are maintenance coordinators who are really good at their jobs, but they may not have been doing it that long, right? They may be incredibly organized, they speak well, very efficient, but they might not know a ton about HVAC or something else, right? And they're not experts, as was mentioned. So finding team members within your group who, can have those conversations, catch red flags, ask the right questions, all that kind of stuff is really important.
So how would you stack rank vendor pricing competitiveness against speed of repair and resident satisfaction?
Well, I think customer satisfaction is probably going to be the highest level of those three. Because speed of repair, again, if you do it fast but you do a bad job at it, the speed at that point is irrelevant. And again, customer satisfaction is usually a better indicator of the quality of work. So again, you can get work done really fast and really cheap, and it really stinks. So then you just end up doing the same work really fast and really cheap over and over and over again. So of those indicators, I would rank customer satisfaction higher just because it's usually a better indicator. However, I don't think you can separate those three. You really need all three of them to get a holistic picture. But if you held a gun to my head and said pick one, customer satisfaction is typically, to me, a better indicator of the overall quality of the work that's being done.
Is there a place you can find that?
Yes, there is. Right on your dashboard, right in front,
How about that?
in your face.
Yeah, I agree. I think customer satisfaction is, it's what drives all of us mad most of the time, right? When we're dealing with, certain issues, and that's where a lot of times you'll see something that you weren't seeing before, right? You get a certain call, an email comes through, and you're trying to figure out sort of what happened here. So I think that would be number one if there had to be number one. But I also agree. I think they sort of feed each other. I think you do like one equal sign, one again, and then another equal sign, and then the other, because they all sort of, no matter what order you put them in, they all feed through each other. But I think the customer satisfaction piece would be the one that would probably tell you the most about the other two, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do want to add one caveat, because I do it all the time, is make sure you true up your data. Just because you might have gotten a low customer satisfaction, it might be for something completely arbitrary. We had a tenant who was a clean freak, and so the guy didn't want to wash his hands in the house, so he got a water bottle and washed his hands out in the yard, and the tenant was convinced that he was peeing in their yard. So there are things that are out there that affect that customer satisfaction that are just anomalies. So there's always a grain of salt with any of the looking at these KPIs and making sure that the data is true. You've trued up the data, gotten rid of the outliers. But yeah.
It's like any equation, you take out the top score and you take out the bottom score, right? So hopefully that takes away some of the extenuating circumstances and then focus on really what that meaning is. But yeah, I'm just gonna say ditto, but I think there's also, keep in mind, nobody wants a tenant to call back. So hopefully that, they're satisfied to a point. Tenants are they ever satisfied? I don't know. So, they're satisfied for at least 24 hours after the work was done until another problem happens. So it's kind of like a hard measured to like, they're never happy. So I would focus on the owner relationship because honestly, that's my fiduciary responsibility and they're my client. So if they're happy because I executed something, I stayed within budget again, that was more important. It's not that I didn't put any weight on tenant satisfaction, but I looked to owner satisfaction more.
Yeah, and owners are gonna be satisfied if the tenant stays, so it captures both of them together.
Okay, should we open it up for questions from the crowd before we break out into roundtables?
Answer them all.
Bueller.
We're gonna need Chris from our CSM team to come up with some wake-up yoga. Fun facts about Chris, we haven't met him, he's a yogi.
So I had a question on the satisfaction score that's only based on reviews that tenants have submitted after the building is closed, right? And they're asked one time to submit a review, or is there a series of requests? Or can we create a workflow to remind them if they haven't submitted the review?
You can create a workflow to do that, to remind them of it.
Because I think if we get more, it's gonna help because it's done by us.
Yeah, that is a good point, is when you're looking at your customer satisfaction, try to look at the quantity. If you did 3,000 melds and you have 5 responses, that's not an accurate number. Unless they're all 5s, then you can tell your boss to give you the $10,000 bonus.
We have an internal maintenance team.
You can't do this straight up. You have to hold it straight up.
You dump the volume out if you turn it upside down.
Check, check, hey.
All right, so we have an internal maintenance team, giving serious consideration to how we can grow that, scale it as we go as a company. And just wondering, your perspective on what would be the low-hanging fruit that you would think, getting rid of all the extenuating or external factors that would make you decide what categories of work you would focus on initially with your internal team. So forgetting about the fact that whether vendors are available or the work pool is out there or whatever, just thinking about it from a pure perspective of operations and return that you get from having an internal team versus a vendor doing cleaning, doing lawn maintenance, whatever. What categories of work would you focus on first?
General maintenance, just cosmetic, easy repairs, quick turns, 3 days or less, 2 days or less, that stuff, that's like the most valuable thing right there, because you can build on that. And the other things based off the categories are easy to find in vendors, right? HVAC, electrical, plumbing, lawn care, cleaners, things like that. But general handyman tend to be some of the hardest, but actually service requests you can make the most money off of because they're quicker, right? We turn those over faster. So have timelines scheduled for those, have expectations on what the standard is internally for a service request. If it comes in, it needs to be responded to within that same day, it needs to be given a status, it needs to be dispatched. Then once it's dispatched, that's who you're gonna give it to as your general handyman. How quickly they're turning that over, going on to the next.
Yeah.
And beyond general, well, for me, it was painters actually. Again, I did a lot of money on painting. So painters was actually my next thing. First, it's also, people hate painting, I hate painting. It's actually kind of a monotonous job, but there's a huge margin in painting. When I discovered that, when I had actually hired people to do painting, like were employees, they were charging a lot, but that's what it was kind of the going rate. So when I internalized that, oh my gosh, that changed my whole average of percentage, and that was like a game changer. So painting for me was the next thing.
Yeah, and I tend to think when it comes to the more specialized, when you're going in and somebody needs to be certified or somebody needs to have, you're gonna get a pretty good quality. When Mike Holmes is up here talking about the 2070-10, if you're certified and you've got a license and you can do some of this work, you're typically in a little bit better category. Whereas a handyman, I could go today and put my name out there and be a handyman, and I guarantee you don't want me touching anything. So that's where it's nice, that's the low-hanging fruit to bring internal, because then you know what kind of quality you're sending out there for the
And if you find a
handyman.
good handyman, please pay them well. So one of the things, I had a really good one, and he wasn't an employee at the time. And this was when I was actually on the cusp of like, do I bring them, like I had to weigh the options, W-2 versus 1099 because of the cost. I finally was like, what is it gonna take for me to bring you in? And he told me his price, and it was not, it was very reasonable, and I was like, done. Because I did not, he kept getting taken away from me. And I just, for other jobs, and that was frustrating. Because I relied on him so much. I'm like, just pay them well, the work will come. It's like Field of Dreams, it will come. The work is always there, trust me.
Yeah, certainly general maintenance, but I also believe that we hired an in-house cleaning technician. That was extremely low-hanging fruit because it's more or less set it and forget it, right? You build a calendar out. We manage a lot of large multifamily buildings, having them spend time at each property. That margin is also really high. And you also have another set of eyes from your company representing you out at your properties to report issues, all of that kind of stuff, in addition to your inspection team. But, you know, basically you can get, you know, in some of our buildings that require once or twice a week cleaning, somebody's there sending us photos, you know, set up a Google Sheet, they just throw pictures in there every time they make a visit. You know, so that was low-hanging fruit as well. And then when it comes to certifications, lead inspections, we took advantage of all this, I don't call it craziness with lead inspections because it's a safety issue, but it feels crazy, at least in Philly. But, you know, we hired a couple of people who were certified lead inspectors. One of them got a certification right after they started with us. And they do that, you know, there's a time of the year where we get flooded, we get new properties. You know, they throw that on the calendar, that's a billable item, you know, and you know, it could be 10 in a day, you know, whatever the calendar provides or whatever the needs are. But that was also something that we just hopped right on.
It's funny that you say that about like the lead case, because in Minneapolis, there was a lot of rental restrictions. I actually was fine with them because it actually brought me more business. So I'm one of those that kind of liked some of that because it allowed, I mean, you can't get around it. So the owner had to do it, and that generated more income. So again, I love maintenance, and it was making money for me, so I was fine with it.
That's a
I
little
look
bit.
at it positive.
Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah, the environment changed. There was a need.
Yeah.
We were right there. We filled it. You know, so again, low-hanging fruit.
Thanks. I have a specific question, more like, we have had some issues recently with the part of the move-out cleaning, moving cleaning, because we send our inspector, they just send us like a rate of cleanliness, say like, yeah, this is probably like 3 out of 5, according to them. However, when we do the move-out, we send the cleaners, they charge us like $800, and they say that no, this property needed a new cleaning. And of course, the tenants complain, and they say that they send their own vendors. So this is one of the tricky questions that we have now, like, how do I identify like this property is really clean, or have like a standard and saying like this is a property that is already clean, and avoid the situation of coming back and forth with the tenants and moving move outs and making sure the property is really clean. Do we have like a standard?
I have an answer to that. You really need to, that's one of the first things you need to establish is what is your rent-ready condition? Because your interpretation and mine are probably going to be different, right? So when people say hotel clean, what does that mean? Because I've gone into hotels that should be nice, they're not that nice, and I'll look. So set that standard up front. That is something you give at onboarding both to your owners and to tenants, so they understand this is the expectation. Now let's hope you met that expectation, because again, tenants will then check to see if you did. And then with that, that's the expectation of what you're going to hold them to when they move out. If it doesn't meet it, just kind of look what Alex said. Maybe you want to internalize cleaning, because $800 is a lot. So, and cleaners was a huge pain point for me. We went through a ton of them, and it was finding the right people to really, I mean, that's not a fun fun job either in knowing that. So yes, you have to pay them well, but it might be a cost savings to internalize that, depending on how big you are.
And at the minimum, they need to know what you're willing to pay for a cleaning, because, you know, I agree, I can't fathom that, right? But, and there's a range that, you know, in your market, what the going rate is, and what your expectations are, what your owners are comfortable with, all of that matters. But there should never be a lot of ambiguity on what that price should be, unless they're documenting, like, hey, we found, and unfortunately I've had this happen, we found like a pet who had passed and was like rolled up in the carpet in the basement. You know, they're gonna charge you more for that, you know. Yeah, absolutely, exactly. So, it could be anything rolled up in the basement, but, yeah, that, you gotta set expectations, and then, you know, have a comfortable conversation with them about what upcharges might, you know, come into play there, after that.
If you guys want, I'm happy to share this. I didn't like think this is just on the spot, but I've created over the years. I've created a rent-ready expectation, but it's very, very detailed. So some people are visual, and some people are literal, right? They can read it and understand it. Most people would like to see a visual representation of before and after. So I went through every single room of the house with like 3 or 4 representations of pictures. Before, like the lawn, you know, pulling out the fridge, like it shouldn't look like this. This is a dirty one. And then I had a clean version picture. So that's what we gave to our owners, and that's what I share with my consulting clients. If you guys want that, I'm happy to like just, if you see me afterwards, I'll have my team just send it over. But create your own. I mean, my properties aren't gonna try to like some of yours, but I think it'll give you this idea of really setting that expectation up front. Because I'm a huge proponent of like making sure clear expectations, because owners can be really painful if we don't set those boundaries up front.
Yeah, same thing with vendors. If you're telling your vendor to clean, they're gonna give you an $800 quote. If you're telling them to vacuum the carpets, remove one stain from the bedroom, and dust the walls, then they can itemize what it is you're asking them to do. And that carries over not just the cleaning. We get HOA violations all the time, and it's like, mow the yard, and I'll get a quote for $2,000. I'm like, what did this vendor think we said when we said mow the lawn? And they're like showing trees they're gonna remove and bushes. And I was like, no, grass needs to be an inch shorter. That's like $75. That's a postage stamp, like not $1,000. So the communication piece is the bottom of the pyramid, and it's huge. We have to, especially with third-party vendors, be very specific, because their interpretation, even when you're specific, is typically way off of what you just said.
Basically, it sounds awful, but you have to dumb it down a little bit, right? So you just have to make it so it's digestible, and that they can see it, go, oh, that's what you meant, got it.
Yeah, and also, you know, move in, move out, turnovers, that kind of stuff is very different than your everyday maintenance, which you all know, right? So it's a different conversation with your vendor. I personally handle all of the move in, move out coordination for my company. And we have, you know, end of July, we had 160 people move out. That they all moved out on July 26th. August 1st, 80 of those units had move-ins. So I have 5 days to turn over 80 units. That's a lot of coordination, a lot of vendors, a lot of painting, repairs, cleaning. You really have to talk to each and every one of them, make sure the expectations are clear, make sure they understand what you're looking for, what the price point should be, right? And you just really have to talk through all of that, because there's not a real margin of error. And then tenants will move in, and you know, and I love, like, I don't want to hear anything from any tenant for 30 days, right? That's a pretty high standard, and you know, it's a good standard, but that requires a lot of work on the front end to be able to get those types of results. So
Alex, you just spoke my love language. 160 move-outs, that was awesome.
it's scary. But we only have 50 at the end of September, so you know, busy season is over.
My question is in regards to also what you said about moving in move-outs. Do you have separate teams that will handle that? And similar to that, we have owners that own more than 20 or 30 units that will constantly be acquiring new properties. They say, hey, I got these new 5 units, they all need to be remodeled. So we were thinking of having a separate team that will be handling those. And as of right now, we just have our everyday vendors do that.
Yeah, so the way I handle new properties, new owners that come in, so I have an assistant property manager who will do an inspection of every new property that we take on board for management, communicate to the owner immediately what our expectations are for our standards of what move-in ready would look like if it's not occupied, and then we'll get vendors, pricing, all of that, and we treat that different than our move-in, move-out, our turnovers, our standard like move-out turnovers. So those are also a couple of different vendors that we don't typically use for regular general maintenance, out of our third-party vendor pool, because my maintenance coordinators would kill me if I just took all their guys and hoarded them for 2 weeks or a week and got all this work done. So yes, I would definitely think that you should have different groups, but take advantage of time, right? For me, with my specific setup, time is of the essence. So when you have a new property coming on, it's going to be vacant. You don't necessarily have a move-in schedule. Maybe you do, but perhaps it's 2 or 3 weeks out. Take that opportunity to get the property, done, get it done right, use the right people, because you just have a little bit more time. You're not necessarily under the gun. So yes, I would recommend you using a different crew, and don't pull so much from your regular maintenance staff, as much as possible.
Ditto, that was well said, yeah.
Yeah, short answer is yes, we have a turns team or a renovation team that's separate from our maintenance team.
I'm Tyler Crow with Ace Property Management. And this gentleman was talking about cleaning, and I'm kind of a wannabe panelist. And I've been shocked over the last 2 years how much difference it has made for me to start in the move-in process, emphasizing that I don't want their deposit. Like, I don't want to keep it. If I'm keeping it, something went wrong, like it's refundable. You can get the whole thing back if you leave it in this condition. And then I've also started saying, vacuum out the doors, wipe down the doors. Any hair of any kind, tenants don't. It's gross. I'll hire someone, for $300 to come and wipe down the hair, or you could do it. So, just pointing out that it's refundable. I'm not going to just keep it because.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we do all single-family homes. We don't manage multifamily, and it's a different ballgame than multifamily. So there's a lot of education that goes into onboarding somebody, whether it's a tenant or whether it's a new homeowner who might have owned a multifamily and now is owning a single-family home, of what the expectations are. So we, again, the base of the pyramid, what everything's built on is communication. So the more that we can communicate with tenants up front on expectations, the better off the whole relationship is for the entire time they're there, and the smoother things go when it comes to turning it or move out.
Josh, you're sitting over here talking pyramids, talk dirty.
No.
I love this.
Yeah, have to take your jacket off, huh? Getting a little hot in here.
Okay, great panel.
Thank you guys. I'm gonna kind of shake the schedule up just slightly, because I wanna give, Tenant Turner an opportunity to talk to you for a few minutes, before we break out into the roundtable, just in case you guys take your roundtable discussions outside of the ballroom. So he's gonna come up for a quick 10 minutes. He asked for Deb to stay on the stage. You guys get to leave. But then we'll break up into the roundtables, and I believe at, sorry, I'm pulling up my schedule. Somebody else know the schedule? There it is, okay. At 3:30, we will break out into the final breakout session. in your breakout rooms. So we'll let Tim take the stage real quick, breakout session, or round tables, and then meet in the, breakout rooms at 3:30. Also, my amazing team was out and about talking with y'all and found a desire for people to go to Mount Rushmore tomorrow. So they found a tour company that will take you there. So we have 6 spots available on that bus. First come, first serve. Liz, can they talk to you? So Liz in the back, if you're interested in going to see Mount Rushmore tomorrow, connect with Liz and she'll get you on that tour. All right, Tim, I'm really gonna take the stage because I feel like I'm rambling now.